Inspector Mueller, the president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
That was House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler getting Robert Mueller essentially to say that his report does not exonerate the president. But there are a lot of questions about that specifically. Can a prosecutor exonerate anyone? Our powerful legal panel is here with us tonight to talk more about the Robert Mueller testimony. With us here, Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, Newsmax contributor, and the author of the case against impeaching Donald Trump, Alan Dershowitz. Also here with us, former U.S. attorney and legal analyst Kendall Coffey is here with us in studio. And also joining us, a member of the Trump 2020 Advisory Board, Jenna Ellis Rives. Thank you all very much for being with us. Kendall, great to have you in the studio with us. Professor Dershowitz, first to you, what was your biggest takeaway from today's 7 hours of testimony?
Well, I had two takeaways. First, we should never again call the report the Mueller report. It's not even clear that Mueller is completely aware of what's in it. He seemed not to be familiar with the content. You know, I wrote an introduction to the report. I knew a lot of things that were in it that he had to check. So I think we have to call it now the staff report, not the Mueller report. His name is attached to it because he is a very credible person, and he was the titular nominal head of the investigative group. But from his testimony, I'm not confident that he made the critical decisions regarding the report, either the critical hiring decisions or the critical substantive decisions. The second takeaway, of course, is exoneration. Who's ever heard of that term? In terms of a prosecutor has no power to exonerate. God exonerates. Maybe historians exonerate. But prosecutors don't exonerate. They don't have access to all the evidence necessary to exonerate. They only get the evidence that they're entitled to, restricted by rules of evidence, and also only for the purpose of determining whether to go forward and indict. So I think we should rid exoneration from prosecutors' vocabulary. It's a political term. I understand when the president uses it. I understand when he uses it. But lawyers shouldn't use it.
It's one of those journalese terms, too, that we hear so much about, and it's a very passive word because somebody's exonerated by maybe a trial or something. Kendall Coffey, what was your biggest takeaway from watching this hearing today?
That it's finally over. Yeah. You know, there were just so many attempts to drag this out. We all think that it could have been resolved, especially the critical question of was there active conspiracy between Russian agents and the Trump campaign. That could have been resolved a long time ago. That was a transcendent question. But finally, somewhat at the expense of a distinguished American, which Robert Mueller is. His performance today, everything we've heard and seen, this is over.
Yeah, that is the biggest takeaway, I think, you know, across the board. We've heard so much. Jenna, even from liberals today and Democrats, you know, aside from those who, I guess, have to keep a happy face on, David Cicilline, who we heard a soundbite from, who says he's going to push forward, and Jamie Raskin as well. You know, we heard a very specific, I think Doug Collins deserves a lot of credit for getting Robert Mueller on record to kind of clear up all the confusion, the difference between collusion and conspiracy. Very clearly the point was made today that there is really effectively no difference. It's a semantics argument, and that there was no collusion and no conspiracy. That's the end.
Right. And so, you know, Democrats are going to continue to push the impeachment narrative because they know that this is the only possible shot that they have against President Trump in 2020. They can't win fair and square on an election. And so they're going to have to try to convince the American people and other fellow members of Congress that he's actually worthy of impeachment based on the fact that they don't like him. But the biggest takeaway here from a legal standpoint is that nothing has changed since April. Nothing has changed. These legal questions have been asked and answered, and what the American people should have seen today is that there is a reason, that there is a big difference between the court of public opinion and politics and that type of circus and a court of law. Because a court of law actually has terms like, you know, burden of proof, like clear and convincing evidence, like proof beyond Indian all reasonable doubt. Even things like the difference between guilty and not guilty. We don't use words like exoneration, like Alan Dershowitz just said. But in the court of public opinion, all of these little sound bites and this kabuki theater can play like a box office blockbuster. And that's all that the Democrats were hoping for. And so what the American people need to understand is that we have the rule of law for a very, very important reason. We learned this with Justice Brett Kavanaugh's hearing. We've learned it today. And with everything going on in the Mueller report, this
now we've learned is that the utility of these special counsel proceedings, it doesn't seem to work out very well. I want to talk about what's next here. Senate Republicans, guys, have their own investigations going on into the investigators. Attorney General William Barr has authorized an investigation into the origins of the special counsel's probe. So let's go around the group, starting with you, Kendall, then Jenna, and last word to Professor Dershowitz. What do you see coming next? Do you anticipate any criminal charges for any of the people, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew Weissman, any of these people who have been kind of implicated as possibly having corrupt motives?
Well, Strzok and Page went far beyond the rules. They basically were, let's use the word collusion or conspiracy, but they seem to be talking about some way to keep Donald Trump from being elected president of the United States. I hope there's consequences for that, because that's one of the most pernicious things of all that I've heard over the last couple of years.
Jenna?
Yeah, I absolutely think that when the Inspector General report is handed down, I mean, this is why the Democrats have tried to inflame and really go against William Barr's credibility in the mainstream media, because his obligation as Attorney General, again, if we're talking about the law, is to do whatsoever justice requires, and he has to hand down indictments in the interest of justice when people break the law. And so going beyond just this witch hunt against President Trump, when more evidence comes out, especially with James Comey and all of the potential spying, all of these things that are coming out as far as the inception of this Russia probe, you better believe there's going to be indictments, and that is not going to bode well for the Democrats.
Professor Dershowitz?
Wrong. I hope that's wrong. I want to see disarmament. I want to see both sides lay down the weaponization of criminal justice. I want to see stop using the criminal law against political enemies on both sides. And I think Democrats and Republicans are equally guilty here. We need disarmament. Let's have an Inspector General's report. Let's have a commission appointed to look into how to stop Russia from intruding into our elections. But let's use the criminal law only when there's just clear, unequivocal violation of existing statutes. Let's not use metaphors like collusion or the way in which obstruction of justice has been thrown around. For example, not a single person asked the following question: can a president be convicted of obstruction of justice if he were to have fired Mueller? Everybody said, well, maybe he tried to fire him, maybe he did this, but nobody asked the fundamental legal question: can a president be convicted of obstruction of justice by exercising his authority under Article 2 of the Constitution? The precedent in the George H.W. Bush case says no. He pardoned Caspar Weinberger for the purpose of stopping the investigation. And yet nobody suggested that that exercise of Article 2 power could constitute the actus reus, that is the act element of a crime. I wish that issue had come up, but it didn't. So I hope we see disarmament and less use of the criminal justice system by both sides.
And I was just going to wrap up with this question. Is there anything that from what you saw today over the last few months that gives you any empirical evidence or concrete evidence that hope is going to come to fruition, that there'll be some disarmament when it comes to these political prosecutions?
I don't. I think we're seeing growing extremism on both sides. As a liberal Democrat, that hurts my party. I think today was a bad day for Democrats, and I think the whole move to impeach the president is going to hurt the Democrats in the 2020 election. I'd like to see them get back together, move to the center, and legislate the way they're supposed to legislate and move away from this acrimonious and divisive politics.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Jenna, we got to run to commercial break, but we're going to stick around. Kendall, Jenna, and Professor Dershowitz are all coming back. We're going to continue our conversation on legal aspects. Did we learn anything today from the Mueller hearings? I don't think we did, but we'll continue this conversation. Stay with us. More to come. We'll be right back.
you give me an example other than Donald Trump where the Justice Department determined that an investigated person was not exonerated because their innocence was not conclusively determined?
I cannot, but this is a unique
Okay,
situation.
well, you can't. Time is short. I've got 5 minutes. Let's just leave it at you can't find it because I'll tell you why. It doesn't exist. That volume 2 of this report was not authorized under the law to be written. It was written to a legal standard that does not exist at the Justice Department. And it was written in violation of every DOJ principle about extra prosecutorial commentary. I agree with the chairman this morning when he said Donald Trump is not above the law. He's not. But he damn sure shouldn't be below the law, which is where volume 2 of this report puts him.
That is Texas Congressman John Ratliff, a former federal prosecutor, accusing Robert Mueller of offering his own prosecutorial analysis about the crimes that didn't happen. Crimes that were never charged. Welcome back to Newsmax Now. Still with us here on set with me, Kendall Coffey, attorney and former U.S. attorney. Also with us, Alan Dershowitz joining us via Skype, and Jenna Ellis Rives as well, coming to us from Skype. Professor Dershowitz, this has always been one of your biggest issues with having a special counsel's office. They get to issue these reports. You also were very critical of James Comey for issuing his summary judgment of Hillary Clinton without charging her with anything. They get to present a very negative case against the president in this case, or Hillary Clinton with James Comey, and it's not fair to the person who's the subject of the investigation, is it?
That's right. And of course, what Comey did is exactly the same thing, except in just 3 words. But he basically said that Hillary Clinton, we're not going to prosecute her, but she's not exonerated because she engaged in extreme carelessness with regard to her use of the emails. And every Democrat, including me, was very, very critical of Comey. And where are the Democrats? Why aren't they as critical of this, the report itself? You know, I'm an opponent of the making public these reports. There's nothing in the regulations of the Justice Department that require that reports of special counsel be made public. They're supposed to be given confidentially to the Attorney General of the United States. And I think it was a mistake to issue them publicly. We're all curious. We all want to know where the $30 million went. But I think it really violates very, very important standards of justice to start making attacks on people who have no opportunity to defend themselves. You know who said this many years ago? The former Attorney General of the United States from Florida, Janet Reno, when she issued a criticism of the Starr report. She said there shouldn't be reports like this because they authorize prosecutors to say terrible things about people who are not prosecuted and who there's insufficient evidence to go after. I wish we had listened to her and didn't introduce special counsel. I hope that the
imagine if district attorneys could run around firing off press conferences about how dangerous somebody was without charging with the crime. It'd be a huge violation of their their rights. Kendall, is it time to get rid of the special counsel's process?
It surely is. Professor Dershowitz is right. Former Attorney General Reno was right. And in fact, the Congress and the Senate were right when they chose not to extend the independent counsel's office after the Clinton impeachment proceedings. This process is ill-conceived, and it also needs to be part of what disappeared today.
Jenna, do you think this is the last time we'll have a special counsel's office constructed in this way?
You know, unfortunately, probably not, because when it comes to investigations like this under our two-party system, it's political over-seeking actual truth. If everyone was genuinely seeking the truth of the matter here, which is what prosecutors are actually obligated to do, that's what the interest of justice means, and what it requires is that you are fact-seeking, not political opportunism, then we wouldn't see things like this. We wouldn't see these kinds of congressional hearings. And I just want to clarify, too, I mean, I agree with what Professor Dershowitz said earlier in the last segment as far as not having any sort of charges that are politically motivated and biased, but that doesn't mean that the Attorney General shouldn't charge things that are actual criminal conduct. And if we could get back to looking at facts and truth above political partisan circus interests, that's the legitimate obligation of government. But when you have somebody like a special counsel who's doing things out of fundamentally political motivation and bias, then you have these types of reports that come out, and they have exactly what happened with Comey, with Hillary. all of these things that are politically motivated rather than the actual legitimacy of the operation of interests of justice. And I don't think we're going to see a stop to that anytime soon, because the American people want to have their popcorn. They want to look at this. And unfortunately, they're not looking at the legal analysis.
You mentioned the popcorn and the spectacle aspect of this. A lot of that was driven by the media and their buildup for all this. One other aspect I want to focus on real quick. During the first hearing in front of the House Judiciary Committee, Mueller had to make a correction to one of his previous answers. Let's take a listen.
I want to go back to one thing that was said this morning by Mr. Liu, who said, and I quote, "You didn't charge the president because of the OLC opinion." That is not the correct way to say it. As we say in the report, and as I said at the opening, we did not reach a determination as to whether the president committed a crime.
Professor Dershowitz, why do you think is so important for him to come out and correct this?
Well, first of all, it gives a new definition to the term chutzpah. For him to blame that on the congressman, it wasn't the congressman's question that was wrong. It was his answer. His answer was, yes, that is correct. So what he should be withdrawing was his own answer. Look, I don't know what role the Office of Legal Counsel opinion played, but I don't know any more than I knew before. We have a firm statement by the special counsel that, yes, that was the reason. And then his staff and his friends and his advisors tell him he has to pull back. So he basically reads from the report, I think, adding to the confusion. To this day, I think Democrats are going to still say, and they have a basis for saying it, even though he pulled back a little bit, that maybe the only reason that this group didn't indict the president was because of the OLC opinion. It was very, very confusing. And in the end, I think we're supposed to believe that that wasn't the reason, that there were other reasons. But if you read the whole report and you listen to the totality of the testimony, you come away without knowing for sure what role the Office of Legal Counsel opinion played in the decision not to charge the president.
All right, we got a minute left. I want to get another quick answer from everybody before we have to go to commercial break. Mueller also said today that Trump can be charged when he leaves office. What is the what percentage chance of that happening do you think we'll see?
Well, I think it's between 0 and 1%. If what they're talking about is obstruction, just as Alan Dershowitz has been writing for months, the president's decision to fire somebody, the other things they said he did in the Oval Office, those same things, as a matter of the Constitution, are simply not a crime when the president's involved.
Jenna, grasping at straws here?
Yeah,
Democrats
absolutely.
hoping?
About
5 years from now.
There's no, there's no probable cause here, and certainly not evidence beyond any and all reasonable doubt. So no reasonable prosecutor, not to use Comey's words, but no prosecutor is going to pursue that.
But the nightmare scenario is that the Democrats win the election, radical Democrats win the election, and they instruct the attorney general, let's do what we do in banana republics. Let's go after the outgoing president and let's put him on trial. I don't think it's going to happen. I hope it's not going to happen. But with some members of the party, it could happen.
Yeah, you don't know. It's going to be a big factor in the election. We'll hear a lot about it. Special thanks to Alan Dershowitz, Kendall Coffey for coming in, and Jenna Ellis Rives. Great to talk to you as always. Jenna's coming back, actually. She's going to stick around. We'll say goodbye to the other two. Coming up when we return, Boris Johnson is sworn in as the new British Prime Minister. Plus, social media giant Facebook pays the largest fine ever for its privacy practices. We'll catch up on those stories when we come back.